Welcome to the Tzurba M'Rabanan Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the Halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years. Tzurba volumes are available for purchase worldwide on Amazon. And to learn more about Tzurba, or for those in Eretz Yisrael looking to purchase volumes, please head over to tzurbaolami.com. For more information, see the description below. And now, Rabbi Shalom Rosner.
Okay, here we go for the second installment of the Malacha of Kosev. We are in the Tzurba M'Rabanan Volume number 21, and the Lax Family Edition, the Mervis Family Volume, and we're in the Malacha of Kosev and Mochik. We spoke last time about the basics of Kosev, 2 letters. What about, it has to be Kayama. If it's not Shal Kayama, it's D'Rabanan. What does not Shal Kayama mean? We spoke about even less than Shal Kayama. You just write in the air, that's nothing. If you write on a fogged up window, that is something. What about electronic displays? Different languages. We have that Arzarua and the Raviyah that say that only Lashon HaKodesh, only Hebrew is Daraisa. And the Ramah quotes it. But all the other Rishonim, the Mishnah Berurah says, and others say, what's going on? How could that be? So Das Yachid, why does Ramah quote it? And Rav Avadia Kedarka Bakodesh said that no, there are many Rishonim that hold like it, and it's definitely Yesh B'Yam Al Lismoch if one needs. That was all Kosev. And then Mochek was the opposite sometimes, but we said there are differences. The Gemara says there are differences. If you write one big letter, that's not Daraisa. If you erase the one letter with the space of writing 2 letters, that would be Daraisa. So that's Chumra B'Mochek, Miba Kosev. And then the last point we made, which is really a transition from last week to this week, we spoke about cutting letters while eating cake. Right? That was what we spoke about, how the Mordechai, the Chuvas Maharash Beis Halevi assumes that it is okay in the Dogam Eravava, but the Ramah was not into it. The Ramah was not a fan. Back in source number 30, the Ramah says, Asr l'shaber uga shekasal of kiminosios. You're not allowed to cut letters on cake. That's what we said. You have to cut them beforehand. You only have kavanah to eat it. If you eat the letter itself, you take a bite out of an S cookie, so then that's okay. But cutting the letters, so that would be a problem according to the Ramah. But the Dagam Eravava we saw, the Noda B'Yehuda said it's kalkel kalachar yad. So he found some kulas. The Mishnah Berurah also is holds me'ikar adin that will be okay. The Chazon Ish was machmir, and we saw the Shmir Shabbos L'Maisa says that one shouldn't cut the letters as we mentioned. So what about now? We're going to talk about not cutting between the letters, let's say. What about being makarev letters to each other, joining letters, separating letters? Let us see where this takes us. We're going to start on page 239. Start on page 239. We start with the Mishnah. Start with the Mishnah in Shabbos and the 12th parak. That's parak Habona. Achaz baraz v'achaz bakore. Source 37 on page 239. Achaz baraz v'achaz bakore. The Mishnah says, if there is one, I write one letter on the floor and one letter on the wall. Kasav al shnei kosle abayis. If I write two letters, one on opposite sides of the room on the walls. Al shnei dafei pinkes ve'inegin zemzeh pater. If I write 2 letters that are not written together and they can't be read together, that's an Issa D'Rabanan. That's not D'Araisa. Because the Malacha of Kosev is HaKosev Shtei Osios. And here you wrote 1 os and you wrote 1 os. You didn't write 2 osios. And therefore the Mishnah says it is going to be D'Rabanan. But the Mishnah says, if I wrote in 2 different places and I could, 2 different cities, I wrote 1 letter each and I could bring them together, so then that's going to be D'Araisa. So if it's in the same room on 2 walls, that's going to be D'Rabanan. But if I wrote it in 2 cities, so then it could be D'Araisa. I asked the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Ami, Kasav Osachas B'Tveria, V'achas B'Tzipori. I wrote 1 letter in Tveria, 1 letter in Tzipori. Chayiv. Chayiv? 2 different cities? 2 different, the same room is no good. Ksivahi al shemachusar kreva. Because really you could bring those 2 together. The letter that you wrote on a piece of paper in Tveria and the one in Tzipori, you can bring them together and it could be 2 letters. On the 2 walls, no, they're not going to be. Why? What? You're going to have to break the wall and then bring it. No, that doesn't work. V'atnan kasav al shnei kosli bayis al shnei dafi pinkas ve'negin zem ze pater. But the Mishnah says that they're not read together, you're pater. So why in the case of two cities they're going to be chayiv? Hasam mechusar ma'isa de kreva. Over there where you're chayiv, you wrote perfectly. All you have to do is to bring them close. Bringing them close is not called a lack. And therefore you wrote two letters, it's ki'ilu, you brought them close already. And therefore you're chayiv. But if it's on two different walls, you don't have to, you can't bring them close together. They're two different walls. And therefore, it is different. Based on this discussion, the Ramah in the Chuvas, this is a Chuvas HaRamah, where the Ramah quotes 500 years ago about books and seforim that have writing on the sides of them. On the sides of them, says the Ramah, mutter, because all you're doing is bringing them, they're already there. It's already written. The book is made, well, let's say it this way. Derech tashmisha, we've said in the past, right? If something is meant to be opened and closed like a door, or glasses are meant to be sunglasses and non-sunglasses. So all of that, that's not a true malacha. Zippers, we said. Derech tashmisho. So the Ramah seems to say something like this, derech tashmisho. It's not a true form of writing or erasing because you just open it and close it, and then that wouldn't be a problem. Says the Ramah, let's read it in source 39. Simin Kuf Yotes. Asher sha'alta mimeni. Imuter liftoacho lino b'Shabbos. Are you allowed to open or close? Sefer hakasov alav mi bachutz. The Ramah got this letter, this question in Krakow, right? In Krakow they had letters writing on the outside. Osios kederach shakosvan ala svarim mi bachutz. Like people write on the side. Is there a problem of erasing or writing? When you open the book, you can't read it. The letter's not there until you close it. And then you can read it again. So that's the question. That was your question. So says the Ramah, I think you could be Mako. So number one, is the point that I just said, derech tashmishu. It's meant to be opened and closed. That's not a true malacha, right? Certain types of writing, right? If you write, it's not meant to be erased, right? But a book is meant to be opened and closed. A door is meant to be opened and closed. A zipper is meant to be opened and closed. That's the nature of the activity. So the Ramah says here, it's meant to be opened and closed, so it's not a problem. Va'od yesh ladaktik, and then he quotes the Gemara that we just saw. The Gemara that tells us, Rabbi Yavo, right, if you write one letter in Tver, you're allowed to sipor your chayiv, ksivi el shemachusar kreva, hare kaman. What do you see? When you write the two different letters, bringing them close doesn't accomplish anything more. You wrote it in two different cities, you're already chayiv. Bringing them close together doesn't make you chayiv more. You're already chayiv. So it's not accomplishing anything, just bringing it close. Say here too, it's just bringing it close. Hari kaman de kreva lo mikri mechusar ma'isa klal. Bringing letters, even though that was about bringing letters, and this is bringing parts of letters close, doesn't make a difference. You have two letters that are already written. Right? You're not accomplishing anything more. If you have two letters that are in tzipori, and then you split them, put one in tveria, is that machika? That's not machika. Because that's just machusa, you can just put it back. You're not accomplishing anything more. Same thing says the Ramah here. Even though you're opening and closing, you're just bringing them close and dissing them. Because bringing them close is not really doing anything. Bringing the letters close. It's there, and just like bringing two letters close together, for two letters, the Ramah says just like that's mutter, because you didn't accomplish anything. Writing them in the first place is accomplishing. But then there's only mechusar kreva. You're not lacking anything, so too here. That's the Ramah, the Chuvas Ramah. You're allowed to open seforim and books with letters on the sides. But the Lavush argues, the Lavush says no. He says since one closes the book intentionally and subsequently opening it is worse, he holds. Remember, the Ramah answered cutting the cake, but he matters this. The Lavush is machmir and the Maggid Avram is machmir. The Maggid Avram in source number 40. Because of B'Shuvas HaRamah, they all quote this Ramah. Kuf Yotes, it's a long tshuva. That's only part of it in 39. To sefer shakasav ala dafim osios muter lepaskul v'lanalo. The Ramah says it's muter. V'Lavush kasav shukarv l'chiyav chantas. And Lavush, Rav Mordechai Yafe. Remember, all of his seforim is called the Lavush Malchus, on all based on that pasuk in the Megillah. Mordechai, his name was Mordechai. Mordechai Yeshiv Shara Melech. His sefer Choshen Mishpat is called Butz Va'argaman. I think on your day is called a Teres Zahav, right? And then it's the sefer on Rashi is called Sefer Ha'ora, the Lavush Ha'ora, all based on that pasuk. So Lavush says, no, I think it's a daraisa. Wow, a daraisa to open and close the book. For Lavush Kasav Shukar L'Fichiv Chatas V'Chein Nirli Lahachmir, the Magen Avraham says, I'm not so convinced of the Ramah's rayas. I don't know, his raya from the Gemara, his first point that he made was not a raya, it was a svara, derech tashmisho. But either way, the Magen Avraham does not agree with the heter. The Mamar Mordechai also explains that according to the Lavush, again, the more machmir shita, Mamar Mordechai, earlier poseg, according to the Lavush, bringing the two letters together, what about the Mishnah? Right? What about the Ramah's raya of Mechus or Kreva? You have two letters in two different places. Bringing them together is not accomplishing anything more. Writing them in the two different places, that's the malacha. And it's just Mechus or Kreva. So the Lavush has to agree to that. So what's the difference? The difference is there, as we alluded to, it's two different letters. You're bringing them close together. Here, it's forming the letters itself. When the book is open, there are no letters. That's worse than just Mechus or Kreva. Ayin Taz, says the Mordechai, Sheherach lahatir psichas v'skira sefer shekasav osios v'tevas al adafim. Mi bachutz. He allows it. And even though the letters become undone and done. The Taz, which passes who passes like the Ramah, I don't agree with those rayas. The davar pasha tu be'enai, because it's obvious, says the Mamar Mordechai. Sheyesh l'chalek bein makarev ha'osios zulazu, where the Gemara talks about you have letters already formed. Shekvar ksuvos va'omdos, to this case. L'shover ha'os v'chozer mashlima. You've undone the letter and now you've formed it again. To bekir va'osios lav midi ka'avad. Only in the Gemara's case, not in this case. Masha'en ken k'shemad b'chatzia os el chetzia o she'ishlema v'shovra, our case. De'ein tzurasa alav ha'maisat fei. It's worse. V'nehi t'shal ischayev chatos b'shem kosei bina she'yotav shei osios. Fine, maybe it's not daraisa. It's not daraisa, says the Mamar Mordechai, but something. And therefore, he thinks it's a chilik, and therefore he's nota lahachmir. Nota lahachmir. The Mishnah Berurah says the minhag ha'olam is to be mekel, but one should be machmir unless it's a real tzarach. That's the Mishnah Berurah, and that's what it seems to be the psak. Says the Mishnah Berurah in 42, Shin Mem. Hasefer shekasav al burashe chudei dafav osios otev. Osiesh osrin lepaschal nolachat b'shabes. Some aserit, the Mamar Mordechai and the Lavush. Shaydei hapsicha shover osios havi kamochik. V'havi kechenk shenoah lo havi kakosev. Aval das harama b'tshuva lahakel. The Ramah's mekel v'chein das harbe achronim. The achronim are mekel. V'taman why? To kivan da'asui lin over liftoach tamid. Since it's meant to be open and closed. Derech tashmisho. Right. Interesting. The svara that he quotes of the Ramah is not the raya from the Gemara. It's the derech tashmisho svara. Leka bezeh mishum mechiga v'ksiva v'havi kedelas eniska v'niftach. It's like opening and closing a door. V'chein haminag. The Mishnah Berurah says people do it. I guess in Radin, a lot of people had these types of books. If you could use a different sefer, better to use the other one. But Mishnah Berurah seems to say me'ikar adin, we paskin lakula like the Ramah, but it's better not to if one can survive without it and accomplish something and not waste their whole day without it. The Shmir Shabbos says, also agreeing with the Mishnah Berurah, better not to unless you don't have a choice. But he does quote in the footnotes there that if you just have designs on the side, like often seforim do, like you see in the picture on the bottom of 242, so that's nothing. That's nothing. You're not destroying anything there. Shlomo Zalman says, even Lashitas HaMachmirim. Or the Mishmir Shabbos says, 43. Rabim Mekilim. Liftoach v'liskar sefer ha'shosios otzirim. Rishumim achudei dafa. Many are mekel. Quotes that minhag of the Mishnah Berurah. Ach nachon lahachmir, better to be machmir. V'lo l'shamish b'sefer kazeh. Im yesh biado acher. If you have another sefer, if that's the only chumash in the shul, you want to follow along. If all the chumashim in the shul have writing on the side, you can take it if there's no other one. But if there's another one, you can take the other one. And Shlomo Zalman in the footnote, the bitsiurim chasrei mashmaut ein noagim lahachmir. That we don't have to be machmir. We don't have to be machmir. Others are more meiko, or Mordechai Eliyahu says that maybe you could open it slowly, like one page at a time. If you open up the siddur from the beginning, most of the words are going to be still on the side. So you open it one page at a time, then it's not nikar kamochek. That also would be an allowance. Ratzui shelo liftoach es hasefer miyad be'emsa. Don't open it to the middle right away. Open it from the beginning and then flip the pages. So then it's better. What about finishing up this section? Rav Moshe has an interesting tshuva in Yoredeya, Beis Ayin Hey. What about if you have a page that's a little ripped, that is torn? right? It's torn, putting it back in the proper spot. Let's say sometimes you have a piece of a page and you have to fold it back on, like on a bencher sometimes. Is that okay? Is that called co-save, right? With the picture? Or Moshe says it's not a problem. Because you basically know beforehand what the letter is. Right, and that would be like mechusar kreva. That would really be mechusar kreva. Ubedar daf karua b'sefer ein zeh mechika kishemeir madaf alo mishum ksiva kishemeniach. Moshe says that's not a worry. V'av la lavush, and even according to the lavush, that one would be machmir. By other cases, mistama, this one's mutter. Mistaver shiyater bazeh me'achar deberuba nikar machzis ha'os shal chilek ha'echad. Right, it's nikar on the other side. You're not being misakein anything, and therefore Moshe says it would be okay. What about the last source in this section, the Shiur Shabbos, right? The Shiur Shabbos discusses that if one brings whole letters together, that would be okay, right? Our whole discussion of l'chumra is you're putting together letters based on the closing of the book. But based on the Gemara, just like the chiluk from the Mama Mordechai, if you have whole letters, bringing them together, that would be mutter. So let's say you have a kriya. Yes, say you have a torn page between two letters. For sure, is not a problem. Ubin kriya bein shtei osios shel mila achas, says the Shiur Shabbos in 46. L'chora yesh li v'raya lesar, but he says Shlomo Zalman is matir. The dafkin linin mechikas Hashem yizbarach. Maybe by mechikas Hashem you destroy Hashem's name. You could say there's a problem. Masha enki b'didon didon ein lachush b'masha mafred bein osios. Separating letters is not going to be an issue. Ki kol oso medes b'nifrad. Every letter stands on its own. But it's just mechusar kreva, and also separating them. Okay, so that is Adkan, a book. What other issues can we talk about regarding, and this is all touching on the world of Ksiv and Mechika Daraisa. We're going to get to the Rabbanan. But what about letters on packages? Letters on packages, so often we discussed Korea in a past year. You could rip open packages where you totally destroy it, for a Shabbos need. So what about cutting words? Is the same issue? So that we try not to do, as we'll see. That we try not to do because that's mochek in not being able to put it back, so you don't have the heter of derech tashmisho, of opening and closing the book. In that same tshuva, the Ramah says this. In that same tshuva, in source 47, the Ramah writes in continuation of that tshuva, the Ramah says that cutting letters on a cake and eating it is more problematic, like the Ramah said in the Shulchan Aruch. Why? Because you don't put them back in the same way. Says the Ramah, lo dami lu'uga. The opening the book, when you close the book, it comes back to what it was. What happens by a cake? You eat it. By a cake that have letters, you can't, as I said before. It's a permanent act of mechika, and therefore it's worse. If you separate them, put it back together, maybe it can be mutter. The language of the Taz is that it goes exactly back together, exactly in the same way. It's a little different formulation, right? The Taz says in 48, Kima da'achar shenishtabru lo mo'il shum kiruv, di'efshar lasos me'em chibur echad acher sheshibram. Avakan ein kilka masha marchikam. So you might say there's a difference between the Ramah's formulation and Taz's formulation in terms of opening the packages, but we definitely try l'chadchila not to open packages, any kind of a package, on the words, or cutting any words. The Shiur Shabbos says this in 49, and that's really seems to be the minhag. Divrei ma'afa shedbikum and tavit. There's a label on something. Va'aleh shem ma'afia uchadome yasir b'samach lachila. Just try to remove it. Why samach lachila? Because that's a borer issue. Hachotich nachnik shal klipa so kasav shem beit charosh. It's a factory. Yizar shal lefka ba'osios. Whenever you have letters, it's better to not cut on the letters. Whatever packages you're opening up a potato chips bag, you're opening anything, better to not open up the letters. The Yalkut Yosef is makel here. He assumes like he was more makel like in the cake case, like not like the Ramah, like the Tzurba M'Rabanan and the others. So this would also be an issue. One final point in this section is games of putting letters together. games. So as we said, putting letters together shouldn't be a problem, like the Gemara. So if you have a bananagrams or a Scrabble game where the letters are loose, so then it's not a problem. The Shmir Shabbos does say, and other poskim agree, that if it's somewhat permanent, there's something, I don't know, Scrabble Deluxe or other types of games where the letters stay in place. So that's more of a problem. That's more of a problem. Right? Says the Shmir Shabbos. Mutter l'sachik b'mischake osios v'tziruim. A person could play, is allowed to play with games with letters or pictures. Shebahem manichem osios o chelke osios, where you put the letters or the parts of the letters, o chelke etzmuna zeli. You put things next to each other. Umitzarfim osam lamila shlema o l'tzmuna. And it becomes a picture or a word. Vehu shelo yikvas hamila o asatuna b'mizgeres. As long as it's not in a frame. It's not in something that holds it together. V'gam eina chalakim ashonim mischabrim u'mishatkim zeh bazeh titzraf puzzle. Meaning if they're all flat on the sides and you put them next to each other, a puzzle is more of an issue because they kind of lock in. They kind of lock in if it's going to stay there for more than 24 hours. If you're going to do a puzzle and undo the puzzle, it's okay. But if it's going to stay there, it could be an issue. And then he even adds, what about on a magnetic? So we have paskin like putting a magnet on a fridge and taking it off. So that's not a problem because a magnet that's derech tashmisho. It's not a true connection. But if they're on the fridge and you're going to write something with the letters on the fridge, so that could be more of an issue because that's pretty. It could stay there for a while. It's like in a frame, and that's what the Shmir Shabbos says. Ein lahatzmid osios v'chelkei tziyurim magnetium leluach hamiyuchal lekach or adal samakarer. I better not to do that because that stays in place. If something is very loose, if you just put it next to each other, that's not a problem because that's mechuzah kreva, like the Gemara says. And if you look on page 248, you have a beautiful chart, like all the shitas about what about the book, what about cutting on packaging, what about a cake. This is all a summary of what we did the end of last year and the beginning of this year. Next section, page 249, Isurei D'Rabbanan of Kosef. And there are a number of them. Here you have a few of them, one major topic as we continue. And that is Shtare Hedyotos. Shtare Hedyotos, secular weekday materials, reading weekday materials. So the Mishnah tells us, there's different sections of this that we're going to talk about. The Mishnah tells us in Shabbos, Kuf Mem Ches, Kuf Mem Tes, that a person is not allowed to read off of a written list on Shabbos. It's a halacha, an unknown halacha. Unknown halacha that people don't know. You have to know what's asur and what's mutter. But Mona Adam is Orchav is Paparosa Mipiv. A person can list off by Balpeh the different guests that he has, avalomin aksav, but he can't read it from a list. Why not? 2 days in the Gemara. Why can't you read off a list on Shabbos? My timer, Rav Bibi Amar, Gezerah Shemi Yimechok. If you have a list of like maybe you ran out of something, so you might not serve it, or somebody is not coming, you might want to erase something on the list. Gezerah Shemi Yimechok. Reading a list on Shabbos. Abaya Amar, Gezerah Shemi Yikra B'Shtar Hedyotos. Abaya says, no, it's a Gezerah. If we allow you to read the list, you might come to read secular documents. And that itself is asur mishum kosev, mishum, or merci kid uvdin tachol. But Shari Yados is asur for some reason. And included in that is the isser of a list. So 2 days. In the Gemara, what exactly is the reason that you can't read off of a list? We'll get to that halacha. But what is the definition of Shtar Hedyotos? Very unclear. Rashi, there in Shabbos Kuf Mem Tes, says business-related documents. Okay? The business pages. So that's something that's limited. Shtar Hedyotos shemekach omemkach kamar. The problem is the other Rishonim and Rashi himself seems to include more. Kuf Tezayin, earlier in the Masechta, 54. Kegon shel cheshbonos, okay. O igrus hashluchos limso chayfetz. Stam letters to say hello. That's Rashi. Look at the Rambam says Shari Yevdos are Asr L'kros Shari Yevdos B'Shabbos Shali Kederach Chol V'Yavo Limchok. Again, Rambam says himself Shari Yevdos are Asr because you might come to erase something when reading these documents. Maybe it's a business document that you have. Somebody owes you money, doesn't owe you money. The Rush assumes it's part of Mimso Chefsecha. It's part of weekday activities. Not dafka shema yimchok. Shtari adyotos, the asal mikri behu pirish. Again, it's hard to know what is shtari adyotos. For sure, business pages before ads that you're looking to buy something. So that's for sure shtari adyotos. What about other secular documents? That's a little trickier. Mimso chefsecha v'daber davar, that seems to be business related. What about a novel? What if you only read the novel on Shabbos afternoon? That's a weekday activity. I only read it on Shabbos. So Shtarei Hadyotos for sure, the more limited, we'll get to the larger. But again, the Rashi says, even Igris Rishus. The Rosh says, even the Igris Rishus. So again, although the exact meaning of Shtarei Hadyotos is unclear, there's little ramification because reading other mundane materials outside of Shtarei Hadyotos might be Aser Mishum reading Shtarei Hadyotos. So it doesn't really make a difference. So Shtarei Hadyotos says the Shulchan Aruch. Shtarei Chovos v'cheshbonos v'igros shel shalom. Right, it's business, and also just stam letters. Aser l'krosam. You can't read them. Va'afil ayin bahem. Even just looking at them. So we'll have to see, are there any heterim? So let's go example by example. Guests lists, menus. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Mishnah. It seems like it's aser to read off a list. I don't know, having a simcha, and you want to read off a list. You want to make sure all the food was taken out properly from what you're serving this meal. You want to see all the guests are here. You can't. It's an unknown halacha. Says the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch. Zimein orachim be'echel eminim megadim. The Shulchan Aruch says, it's not like the Achronim say, oh, it doesn't apply today. It does. You have to see what the heter is and how to apply the heter. If you invite a guest and there's different types of food, v'kasa b'ksav kama zimin, and you wrote down who you invited, v'kama megadim echel emin, when the food, aser l'kroso b'shabes. It's also to be koreyed. Afilu mukasav agabe kosel gavo arbe. Even if you're reading it from a place where you're not going to erase, it's all the way up on the wall, because it's included in Shtarei Hadyotos. Shtarei Hadyotos, and the Ramah says afilu iyin ben below kriya aser, even without verbalizing. So even though the Shulchan Aruch mentions the reason of Shtarei Hadyotos, the Ramah, the Mishnah Berurah also gives the reason of Shema Yemchok. Also gives that reason. So what does the host do? What does the host do? I'm making a simcha. You want to make sure everything is served. So the Mishnah Berurah says, double. If you have two factors, Tzorach a Sudas mitzvah, which is everything on Shabbos, Sudas mitzvah, and it's not the host that's reading it. Meaning it's not the one that's in charge that you might come to Shema Yimchok, because it's not your decision. So it's one step removed. You have to tell somebody, that's mutter. So that's the key. That's going to be the secret and the kula. That the host shouldn't be the one that's going to read it. It can be the host's child that reads it. Anybody besides the actual balabas. Says the Mishnah Berurah, source 60. The butler, the servant. Fine, maybe if you don't use the host Shema Yimchok, is not a problem. But what about Shtarei Hadyotos? It says the Mishnah Berurah, and Shtarei Hadyotos should make a difference. Who is reading it? Host or not host? That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. That's what the Shabbos Home says. These are base, the poskim that we rely on, right? It's not a kitzoni sefer or a shita, right? The Shabbos Home says a host or hostess may never read a menu, invitation list, or seating plan on Shabbos. However, one of the exceptions is reading a script of a mitzvah matter. Festive meals, Sudas mitzvah. And therefore, if somebody else reads it, it's mutter. Even if the child of the host or hostess may read it. A husband, if the husband has nothing to do with the decisions about the food of the guests, then he could also read it. That's a good one, right? The husband may read a menu prepared by his wife if he's not actively involved. I'll add, that's not a good mitzias, because a husband should be involved. But if it happens to be that he's not involved, so then you would have this heter. Rav Shlomo Zalman holds that maybe if it's not a whole long list, but it's just a quick glance, maybe that's mutter. You're not reading it all the way down. You just look at it quickly. Rav Shlomo Zalman in the Shiur Shabbos in source 62. I ain't say for Shulchan Shlomo, Shalini Rishimas HaTafritim Shal Sudas Shabbos, Yitachein Shemutter Lahatzitzba V'Liskar. I just want to remember what we're doing first, what are we doing second, what's the order of the courses. You look quickly for that. Oh yeah, just quickly for that. That would be allowed. And in the Ayam Meshulash, Rav Nissen Karelitz, if the Balas Habayis is in real, even if it's not L'tzorach mitzvah, if it's not a Sudas mitzvah, if you don't call it a Sudas mitzvah, like a simcha, but if she's going to be in a terrible distress, maybe that's like Tzorchei Aguf. And again, it'll be mutter with someone else. So number one, lists. Number two, Shtarei Hadyotos, secular material. So what does that include? So Tosfos says, reading about current events and history books. Tosfos, source 64. Osan milchamos, haksuvin balaz, near Rabbeinu Yehuda, da'asar layin bahem. Tosfos says, the reading about wars, that's history books. Asar la'ayin. And the Shulchan Aruch seems to say this. Malitzos u'mishalim shel sichas chulin v'divrei cheshek, like a novel. Sifrei melchamos asur likros b'hem b'Shabbos. The Ramah says, it helps you out a little bit. He says, maybe if it's written in Hebrew, it's better. Wow. That's the Ramah. Maybe the Shulchan Aruch only answers in other languages, but in Hebrew it's better. Why would it make a difference what language it's in? Says the Mishnah Berurah. According to the Ramah, maybe it's mutter because maybe it'll lead you to learn Torah. Lashon HaKodesh, says the Mishnah Berurah, 66. Lashon ba'atzmo yesh bo kedusha. The language itself has kedusha, and there's something constructive where we say we're Romam Tonu Mikal Lashon. Rav Nevitzal points out in his one of his seforim, Mikal Lashon. V'lo me'imenu divrei Torah. It's about the language. And we learn Torah in this language. The Mishnah Berurah did. We also learn Torah in other languages. Ulefi zeh gam igris shalom maksuva b'lashon HaKodesh. So then anything in Hebrew has a better, has a tzad lahakel. But the Mishnah Berurah does quote that Achronim generally don't buy this heter. Aguda taz bach harbe Achronim cholkim al zeh, and it doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a difference. What else are there other heterim? So the Magen Avraham says, in a different context, but he says, if somebody gets Oneg Shabbos from it, they're not reading the business pages, they're not reading the ads, where you're actually going to want to think about buying something or investing in something, that's an Issa D'Rabbanan, Mimsoch Hefsecha. But if you just enjoy it, says the Magen Avraham, Imaraya Hariya Oneg Lo Mutter Lo Liros. If you enjoy it, and some poskim, the Mamar Mordechai says, what do you mean you enjoy it? If it's Asr Midrabanan, then it's Asr Midrabanan. If it's Asr for you to Chazal said it's Shtari Hedyotos, then what kind of because you enjoy it. V'takanas kayemes, says the Mamar Mordechai, v'lo hutra michlala v'chalila lomar, the end of 68. Chas v'shalom shem yesh la oneg d'zor likroso. But we do find that. I think we discussed in the past, the Trumas Hadeshin has a tshuva about those who like to talk about current events after Shabbos, and he says, if you enjoy the current events discussion, you're allowed to. It's oneg Shabbos. If you're only enjoying it for the peer pressure, because you don't enjoy it, then you're not allowed to. But if you enjoy it, it's allowed. It's allowed. The Mishnah Berurah seems to be notel lahachmir, but the Rav Melamed in the Penini Halacha says that if you enjoy it, then it's okay. Secular stuff. After you did the Parsha and after you did Daf Yomi, divrei chol v'sipurim she'en bahem erich asur likro. Stam shtuyot and waste of time, no value, you're not allowed to. Umisha misanig b'kriyasam rashar likro lem derech harai. You can take a look if you enjoy them. Shelo gazru al kriya sheyesh b'hem oneg. That's a key line. They weren't gozer on kriya that has enjoyment, if it's not business related. Aval sipurim misakrin, and this is a very important point. What if it's interesting stories that will cause pain or make you sad? That you're not allowed to do. Right? Sometimes people are catching up on the week, and they're reading difficult, painful stories. That's not supposed to be done on Shabbos. Shabbos is not supposed to be a sad day. What about science and chemistry and biology? So Shulchan Aruch seems to quote 2 days about this. Right? Also, Lomo b'Shabbos v'Yontiv 70. Zulas b'divrei Torah. Only Torah. Afilu sefer chachmas aser. V'yesh b'shamatir. And some are matir sefer chachmas. Al pi svaraso mutar lahabit bits terobla. Looking at a globe. Learning geography on Shabbos. So again, the 2 days, the Mishnah Berurah quotes the minhag is lahakel, even though there are those that are machmer. What about studying for a test? So that should not be done. Right, for the secular studies. If you enjoy it, then you get some oneg, we saw okay. But if you're just doing it for the test, that's not l'shem shemayim, and that wouldn't be okay. One final point, and that is newspapers. About reading a newspaper on Shabbos. So we're only talking about the reading part of it. Getting the newspaper on Shabbos has other issues. It came from outside the Tchum, and it was written for you. So it was typed for you because if all the Orthodox Jews would cancel their subscription to the newspaper, it would make a difference. What about reading yesterday's newspaper? So Tosfos discusses, well, maybe you could read Shtari Hadyotos or a letter because maybe there's something Mishum Pikuach Nefesh in there. Maybe you'll find something out new that's a real need. That's Tosfos. Sheish ben Pikuach Nefesh, even if you think there's none, maybe there's a real tzarech. That doesn't really apply today. Right, that doesn't really apply today. Rabbi Yaakov Emden takes Tosfos' rationale to permit reading a newspaper because, again, it could contain critical information. But at the end, he says, I think it's also because there's plenty of ads. There's plenty of ads in there, in the newspaper. So there's Rabbi Yaakov Emden in Shelas Yavi, 75. Likros bekurtinin hanitfasim bekrachim vayaras gedolos. Midei shavua b'shavua, the newspaper comes out nearly pashut. Shein b'chal iser is not included in Shtari Hadyotos because Nogim al pi arov lakal pran. It's lamaisa. You have to. It's information that you need. And even if in a situation where you're bar, you're clear, there's not going to be anything you need. It's definitely better. So if you enjoy that, you enjoy this, it's okay. Enjoyment is okay. But he says at the end, on top of 258, so fun. They're going to have the business pages. And those for sure you can't read. Okay, you'll just read the first few pages. You won't look at the ads. Stay away from it. So it's interesting, in a lot of Jewish newspapers, there are a lot of ads and stuff. But it could be, I once heard a svara, most of those ads are people really looking at the ads because they're going to actually, buy. People want to see what's going on in the world. It's more part of information. So one maybe could find a tzava hakel there. If there's an ad for a kosher restaurant or a kosher a Pesach program, that's an ad. So some would say no, it's usher. But based on the Shelas Yavetz, you don't come close to it. Rabbi Melamed says if one is reading parts of the newspaper that have to do with enjoyable things to talk about in articles, then that will be okay. But not to read Roy Lihimana. Right, Lodas Rabim, Royli Mana Mikriyas Itonim B'Shabbos, Veishim Me'am Persomos Mischarios, Veishim Harbi Yedios Mitzaros. Number one is a lot of business pages. Number two is a lot of articles that make you upset and sad. What percentage of the news is positive? So one has to know what type of magazine or they're looking at. He quotes in the footnote, right? It's well known that the Nitziv is quoted in the Makar Baruch, right? His biography that was put into Chayrim, that the Nitziv used to read newspapers on Shabbos, right? So it's one has to know what the halacha is. And know what lachanchila we should be doing, and B'ez Hashem, we should be zochet to be mekayim Shabbos, the aura of Shabbos and the message of Shabbos, ki hilchasa. Okay, we'll stop here. B'ez Hashem, next time we get into a totally new world of medicine on Shabbos, a couple of shiurim regarding that, which is the sixth topic in this volume. As we continue, that'll be the sixth and seventh shiur will be medicine related, and B'ez Hashem, we'll continue with that.